Hello. Welcome.
Hello.
All right. Welcome everyone to the Misconception of Domestic Violence. My name is Ayat Solomon. I am the program director of A.Bevy. And I have with me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor J, and I work with the T.R.U.E project as the Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships Director.
So this event came about with a collaboration with the T.R.U.E project, a phenomenal women-ran organization that A.Bevy loves to partner with, especially with anything pertaining to Black women and womanhood. So as it pertains to this event, we all know that Domestic Violence Awareness Month is October, but when Taylor and I began talking about this event, we realized how important it was to dive into domestic violence year long.
Yes, and when we look at statistics on a regular day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls to like domestic violence hotlines. So that just shows, this is a serious issue that people deal with on a regular, not just in October. So we really want to highlight the misconceptions and inform everyone what's going on. So.
Yes. And, furthering the idea of misconceptions, we'll dive into that throughout the panel today, but understanding that labeling things correctly, understanding what can fall under the category of domestic violence, the things that some people don't call it by its name. So we want to make sure that we leave here today aware, educated, and knowledgeable of what does fall under domestic violence, and then hearing that from survivors and hearing that from those people who work in this lane continuously and work hard year round, not just in October, to bring awareness to this.
Yes, absolutely. We hope that everyone learns a lot today. And we also hope that everyone's able to learn when we think about relationships, healthy qualities too. The more knowledge you learn, then, the better, you'll be able to identify what's going on and what's healthy and what's not. So we hope that everyone is able to gain something today.
So that's our goal. That's our objective. And to assist us throughout this conversation, we have some two very phenomenal women who work. Like I stated, this is something that they do year round. They advocate for women. They advocate just through their everyday life, through their brands. This is something that they work on. So I'm going to add to the stage Miss Casey Richardson.
Hi.
Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello, beautiful ladies.
Hello.
I'm so excited. Good to see you.
We also have Miss Shy Means, who will be joining the conversation.
Hi. Good to see you.
We're so happy to have both of you ladies as part of the panel in this discussion. It's something that's very important to us. It's something that we want to empower outside of the social norm of talking about domestic violence, or how cliche it could be, or a lot of people avoid the conversation. So we wanted your assistance in unpacking that, addressing the misconceptions, and also empowering through your stories. So we're so glad to have you. If you both could take a minute to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your platform.
I'll let Casey go first.
Okay. So I'm Casey Richardson. I am currently in Africa. I've been here since February, but I am definitely based in the United States. Oakland, California is where I predominantly reside. One platform that I have is Freedom and Fragility, and it is a wellness lifestyle brand. It exists so that people can express themselves on the other side of healed, right? And it is not a final destination. It is a slow and soft process, but it gives flesh to these stories of healing. And then I also have a coaching and consulting business for Black women called Blaze Group LLC.
Awesome. We're glad to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I am Shanika Means. I am based out of Houston, Texas. So I write, I'm a writer as well as an advocate for women and children. My brand is Purpose Walk, which is just getting started. It's Purpose Walk LLC. And basically, that's trying to get people to understand the walk in purpose after domestic violence or any kind of abuse, physical, mental, whatever you're going through, having to deal with molestation. It's just to help you to try to get on track and to not make it such a stigma or, have a negative connotation on it. So that's what I do.
So, thank you so much for sharing that. We're so glad that both of you guys are here with us today.
Yes. We could just dive right in. Just tell us a little bit about what domestic violence means to you or how it has molded your branding. You're both working and advocating and empowering women. Just tell us a little bit about how that started.
So it started because, once you go through something and you're trying to figure out how to deal with it, you're like, well, I don't want to be the only one, or I don't want to feel like I'm the only one, because sometimes when you go through things, a lot of things sometimes, especially as Black women, we always feel alone, or we have this negative connotation with everything we go through. So for that, I wanted to bring awareness to everybody that you're not alone, and it's okay if you go through something. And I don't want people to make it seem like it's a bad thing, like you're worthless or you're no good because you went through that. I don't want you to have a bad feeling about yourself and being able not to move the way you want to move, because that's how people perceive it. And then when you don't really know about it, people kind of go back to their old mantra from grandma and grandpa type thing. It's like, oh, just stick it out. It's nothing that happened to you. You all right. It's okay. That's what love do. We stay in these things. We fight through because that's what keeps the family together. No, we're not doing that. So I want people to understand that you don't stick stuff out. That doesn't make sense. That's not love. And I don't want people to think that that's some kind of love, some kind of way.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's something we all can attest to hearing at some point. Sticking it out, and yeah.
Yeah, and for me, similar to Shanika, I didn't realize that I was in such close proximity to physical abuse because, like, my entire life, because that's not what it was called. It was called, Big Daddy used to hit on Big Mama, and one day she shot him in the butt. She got tired of that joker, and we laughed about it, man. But for me, like, everything changed for me when domestic violence was the first experience in my life that shattered me to pieces. Like, I had gone through growing up with my mother having been murdered. I mean, brutally murdered when I was 1. I mean, literally knowing that she was chopped up, right? Like seeing in news type stuff. But I was still this overachieving, really tough person. Household to household growing up. By the time I was in the 5th grade, in about 5 different households, but still just very tough and like I'm gonna make it to the other side one day. And when I experienced domestic violence in my marriage, after doing all the things they told me I was supposed to do, to have a good life and make him feel like the head, and being a good church woman, it it shattered me to pieces. And I realized that if I was as strong as I knew I was, and that broke me the way it did, there had to be a whole bunch of sisters out there struggling. So I knew I had to tell my story so that the people watching me thinking that I was perfect or thinking that life was rosy could know that no, like, let me give you the other side of Big Mama's story that they didn't tell us about. This hurts. This is toxic. You are afraid to fall asleep at night. Your family is bothered and stalked, and threatened and all of these things. And that has just morphed into a life of its own as more and more people, reached out to share their stories, and more people said, Casey, I left this dude, after reading your story, or I left this dude because I know I have you to talk to through the rest of this journey. So yeah, experiencing it was the first time I could put vocabulary to it, much like therapy and you being able to name social anxiety, right? Like, oh, that's what that is, right? Yeah, like I'm happy to be a part of this advocacy that all of us on the stage are part of.
Thank you so much for sharing that. You both touched on, Shanika, you touched on that's not love. And Casey, you talk a little bit about that's what shattered you. So I'm strong. So, misconception of it is domestic violence happens because you're weak.
Right.
Shai, tell us a little bit about how we can dismantle that, or, within your own experience, that how can a woman going through that stop and say, I'm not weak because this is happening to me?
Well, I think, like I was telling my dad one day, I was telling him that going to church and being a church person and growing up in church, I think the church for Black people especially confused us, right? Because this is the thing. When I was 5, I was molested. When I was 6, I was molested from 6 to 8. I watched my mom go through abuse. You see? And so then when I go to church every Sunday, Wednesday, sing on the choir, you know what I'm saying? So I'm like saying to God, what did I do? Like, what is my problem? And I felt like I was alone. And I told my dad, I feel like the church has left us abandoned because it makes it seem like you did something wrong. So now all your life, you're going to think, I did something wrong. I'm not following suit. And that's a problem because sometimes that's why we end up staying in these relationships when we shouldn't stay in these relationships, is because we're setting ourselves up, because we're like, oh, we want to be this good, church person. We want to do everything right. And we can't. That's not how it works. And I feel like we've been abandoned. And I feel like in order to dismantle this, we have to bring this to the forefront. We have to say, okay, listen, enough is enough. We can't be silent anymore. We have to stand, but not only stand, we have to stand together, because a lot of times too, in the Black community, especially with Black women, we hate on each other so much instead of saying, listen, come here, sis, let me talk to you, let me help you. And we help each other and we still can get to each other's purpose. It's room for everybody to do everything. So I think the dismantling starts with loving one another. It's okay to accept what has happened to you, because somebody asked me, what do I wish I had knew? What should I have known or felt like I should have knew about what happened? And one thing I always say is, I wish I had knew it wasn't my fault. Mm-hmm. Because I felt like if I knew it wasn't my fault, I wouldn't have blamed myself to the point where I continue to triage people. That's what I call it. When you get into these bad relationships, you triage the patient, and you take their responsibility on, and you feel like if I can help them, I can help myself. And it seems so weird and crazy, but that's very true. You feel like, okay, if I failed them, I failed myself, which makes absolutely no sense. And you have this whole misconception of what love is, because that's how you've seen it. That's how basically the church has told you to be. They told you, this is love. Stick it out, stay in this relationship. It's a sin if you leave, so you sitting here like beating yourself up. You like, oh, okay, I don't want to be a single mother. I don't want to have a kid. I want to do everything it tells me to do. So dismantling is about speaking up and standing for what you believe, but not just standing alone, standing together and telling stories.
Thank you, Shai, for sharing that. I have a follow-up question for you. So with that being said, where do you think you found your strength? Like, at what moment do you think you found your strength? If you look, from where you were to even getting to this moment, I'm sure that's a lot, but where do you think you found the strength?
I think I found my strength in different phases, because we go through different seasons. But the one last season that I really found my strength, and I always tell my oldest daughter, I always say, you saved me. Okay. Because when I was 16, I tried to kill myself. So I said, okay, you saved me. Because for one, I was on the depot shot. So I was getting a shot. I shouldn't have got pregnant at all. I'm like, I shouldn't have had no kid, nothing. But I always tell her she saved me. Then the last step was when my youngest daughter's father pulled out a gun on me in his apartment and was going to shoot me because he got caught cheating. Okay. And I thought to myself, I'm 6 months pregnant and this man is about to take my life. Like, when am I going to like wake up? Like, when is this going to stop? Am I okay to stay in this? Why do I continue? And it's because this is where the church come back in. The misconception is because I did not want to be a single parent of 3 girls. Okay. I wanted to go ahead and marry this man. I was going to still marry this man with all his manipulation, with all his lies, with all his verbal abuse, with all him telling me I was ugly, with all him telling me I had gained weight, with always telling me that nobody want me. I was literally going to stay with this man until he pulled out a gun and I see my life flash before me. And I thought, well, you know what? You're not going to be a mama to nobody because you're not going to be here. So I woke up and I walked out that door and I didn't look back. I had to move several times because he would just pop up, show up. He would show up in my job. He would show up in my work. You know, it's a constant thing. You have to move. Like, you had to move strategically. Everything was planned. I had to move at night. I had to move. I mean, he was threatening to take our child from me. I mean, it was insane. And I don't want nobody to go through this. I think it's a horrible feeling to be able to not sleep at night, to not know if somebody gonna come to your door, to sleep with a knife, to just sit here and be like, okay, every day you go out your door, you looking this way, that way, you trying to see where he at. Did he pop up? Oh my gosh, you should not feel like that.
Thank you. Thank you both for your transparency. I know the audience watching this are getting a lot. It's a lot. Sometimes you have to hear it, you have to put a name to it to feel inspired. Shanika, you talk about the church, but Casey, I want to talk to you a little bit about, because, you know, I'm from Columbia. I'm from the, you know, I know how that community can be. How was it for you to find your strength in that with a community of people that know each other? And sometimes they want to silence it. They don't want to pay attention to the warning signs. They don't want to, you know, hear that it's happening right under their nose until it's too late.
Yeah, I had to transcend it by going somewhere else, to be very frank, right? So in Columbia, where we're from, and it's like this in the Black community everywhere, far and wide, there is such stock put in keeping the family name. So much so, right, that nobody is telling on uncles. Not even if a child speaks up, the mama and the grandma aren't telling on uncles who are molesting children, right? They're not telling on fathers who are abusing the whole household, right? Because they put more stock in keeping the family name than like protecting victims. So when it happened to me, I had been in this relationship for 10 years, not knowing until years after I had left that there were other victims before me, right? I had no idea because nobody talked about it because they kept the family name. And then a family member actually called me because she felt so guilty, you know, and said, actually, let me tell you this. And our family did not respond to it. They just swept it under the rug, right? And when I experienced the abuse, much like Shy, I had to leave. Like I had to keep it under wraps for 12 days that I was moving to a city I had never visited before. I moved 2,700 miles away from Charlotte, North Carolina to California to get away because I was that much in danger. Like the stalking, the calls at work, the leaving letters in my parents' mailboxes, the calling my family in Alabama and other states looking for me, you know? So I had to wait until that day, and it would be nice where I didn't even know if I was gonna get out alive, you know, because like I was that afraid of his mental state and what he would do, right? But in the middle of those 12 days, and I waited 12 days because I wanted the restraining order to be legally in place before I left. I had to wait for the court date so that if he did come near me, he could go to jail. You know, like I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to risk waiting for another opportunity for him to touch me. But a person from his family, I'm not going to say the name, but a close person from his family reached out and said, hey, Casey, were you still coming to the family reunion? I'm like, no, like I'm leaving this man. Like I'm done. Well, no, y'all have to be near each other, but people are expecting you at the family reunion. You know, like no regard for me, no regard for my safety, even though this person herself had been abused, right? So I had to leave and I had to find healing in Oakland, Not to say that Oakland is better than Columbia, but I had to be safe. I had to be removed from that environment so that I could relearn everything I thought that I knew, right? And that is where my strength came. And I became so emboldened that I wrote a book about it called Pain Unseen, the truths that lie beneath my strength. And I was able to share that story very honestly, right? And it was for a lot of people the first time they saw their stories on the page, right? But yeah, unfortunately, our community and many others aren't yet equipped. I'll say equipped because there are tools that we need. Like, we don't need people just winging it, right? Like, this is called the misconceptions of domestic violence. Like, please don't think that the police system is equipped to deal with us. Like, I dealt with so much trauma, like even navigating that system, like
The legal system.
Yes, like there was a particular day where the restraining order, like court notice, was being delivered to him. A marshal went out to give it to him, and he lied. Like he said, "Oh, I already knew y'all were coming." She called me and told me, right? The sheriff called me and said, "You almost got my deputy shot," like yelling. And in that time, like I had PTSD, and I just felt so re-triggered, but just a proclivity not to believe us or not to protect us, or the time where I needed to get my bags. It was almost time to go, and I called a police to come and go in the house with me. I was very afraid of being in that house by myself. And the police, when he got out, he came up to my window before I even got in the car and said, "Y'all always come back. What are you even doing at this house?" Like, just assuming that, so yeah, there needs to be a whole bunch of tools equipped for us, because even when we do answer the call to speak up and save ourselves, we have to navigate a whole bunch of treacherous terrain to make it out alive.
I just want to say that comes back to what Casey was saying. It's because of the systematic racism too that we have and we have to encounter, and that's the reason she went to the police, but I didn't. Because my whole thing was, when I'm with a narcissist, a person who's so narcissistic and manipulative and crazy, it was to the point that he even had told me that if you go get a restraining order, it won't do nothing. I will still do whatever I want to do to you because I can. But the one thing he always used to say was, I can't completely break you yet, but I'm trying to get there. And that's another thing. People think that they can break you. And I thank God that he did not. He didn't completely break me, but he did put something in me, and that was the fear of certain things. And I had to learn to overcome those things. But the system doesn't work in our favor, as Kay said. They need more training. And as you see with mental health, that people come out or after them, they immediately shoot them.
Right.
Because they're not equipped to deal with those things. So we find ourselves in a place of no return, in a sense, because we're lost. We're like in a zone of stuck, right? And that's why it's so important for us as minorities to work together, especially women, to come and make a movement so we can give people those education and we can keep pushing that forward.
Thank you for sharing that.
A big both of you, your transparency again. A lot of people don't know the warning signs, and unfortunately both of your experiences got to the extreme before that full wake up. You had probably moments of truth, like, this don't feel right, but because nothing around you is telling you it's not right, you continue to stay. I want to dive a little bit into, since we are talking about misconceptions of narcissism, manipulation, those are all forms of abuse. If you can just touch on how that form of abuse showed its head early on the relationships, or early on in family dynamics, before it got to what society views as appropriate abuse.
Are you specifically tailoring it to like mental abuse, correct?
Yeah, just verbal abuse, mental abuse, all those forms of abuse before reaching the physical abuse that caused you to leave. So, so people can understand, you can call it by its name.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can go first on this.
Yeah.
And I'll say hindsight is 2020. Like
Right.
when I was sitting in that thing, I was blind. I mean, my family saw stuff, and I was like, really?
Yeah.
But I'll say, I'll preface this because context is everything as well. On top of what I ultimately dealt with, I didn't know I had married a functioning alcoholic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think I was in kind of always in danger in certain instances, but I just didn't know everything until it came to a head, right? So, when things started getting really bad, this was around the time where he was losing job after job, and over time he started reeking. Like that's when I realized, like, you know, he had a problem. He was reeking of alcohol and stuff. And if I would try to say things or whatever, he would be very manipulative, right? Like he would say, you know, why are you insecure? Why are you questioning me? Like, you know, like where's the confident woman that I married? You know, it's just like, you know what? Damn, it's like 4 a.m., bro. Like, you know, like just these things are like, duh, you know. Or he would use so I was similar to what Shai is saying. Like I was so ingrained in the church, y'all. Like I would like sing 2 services. I would lead praise and worship for 2 services a Sunday. I would be at Bible study and do all the things, right? So there would be times where he said, you know, the Holy Spirit, and that was so funny. But in the time, the Holy Spirit is telling me that I need to refrain from having sex with you, you know? And in hindsight, it's just like what was really going on, right? I don't know what he had, you know? But I'm like, are you sure? He's like, are you sure it's the Holy Spirit? You know, and he'd be like, don't question my relationship with God, blah, blah, blah. So it would be months. I'm talking about one time it was like 9 months, right? Where we wouldn't even be physically intimate, right? But I found out about cheating during that time, right? So then all these things that just, and it shouldn't, but makes you like question yourself. And am I doing enough? And am I pushing him away? And, you know, all of these things or whatever. But then it became more and more violent, right? I remember a time where I had found out about an affair he was having, the only affair I knew about, right? And I was going to leave then. I actually did get on a plane and flew to Miami to be with my girlfriends and really get my head together. And he called the church, very manipulative. He called the church, the head of praise and worship, who called me and said, "You are in covenant with God. This is not your decision to make. You made a promise to God, and He has the final say so on this." All of this stuff, right? And I felt guilty. I was like, I don't want to disappoint God, right? Like I don't like this dude, but I don't want to disappoint God. So let me try counseling. Let me try spiritual counseling. And so I came home, and the night I came home, he followed me into the bathroom, right? Just like, where have you, fussing at me or whatever. And I turned around and I'm like, I'm gonna do counseling, but like some things just don't make sense to me. All these months when we weren't having sex, but you were cheating, like what were you doing? Like, do you have something or whatever? And y'all, he punched in his fist, like just grazed, but didn't touch me, right? But barely grazed. And his arm went through the door, right? And I still didn't know I was in danger, but his arm went through the door. And he yelled and he's like, "I waited for you for 6 years and you can't wait for me for 6 months." Again, mind control. Like I waited until marriage to have sex, And so he was holding that up, like just crazy stuff, And then he did like hold my arms and pull me against the window, but he didn't strike me, right? But it was this build up, this build. I remember a time I was putting us on Snapchat and he knocked the phone out of my hand. He didn't touch me, but I didn't know it then. But like the person he was having an affair with was following me on Snapchat. And so he didn't want her to see my phone, just these crazy things. But the night he beat me, right? It's similar to Shai. I found out even after therapy, counseling, that he was still seeing Shawty. And I was serious. I said, I wasn't even upset. I said, "Look, I'm out." Like, I'm divorcing you. I'm not doing this, And he lost it. And that's when it was full blown. And that was when 12 days later I was gone, right? I went to the other side of the country, but it was this buildup of a lot of little things that you just dismiss, right? Or you just try to pray away, like the church tells you to do, when really, yeah, they're warning signs, like you said.
Thank you. It's a lot of people say, "Oh, he shook me." That's not abuse.
Right.
Or we fought.
Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing in love. At least to me, there's no such thing in love as we physically fought.
Right.
Or even like, oh, he threw my phone out of the window. He was angry, but he just threw my phone.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was gonna say, Shy, for you, what were those? Now that you're on the other side, can call them by their name, but when you were in it, it was relationship, the lows that they tell you we endure.
I always put that relationship as to like a predatory thing, because when I was little, the family friend molested me, and then from 6 to 8 it was my uncle, right? And these are people who's supposed to love you, and they play these little footsie games with you, like when you were a kid, they'd be like, "Oh, you like that game? I'm gonna just slide this over and I'm gonna play with you," right? And it's the same kind of thing when you get into a domestic violence relationship. They gain your trust, you right? And they play these little games with you. They like, "Oh, I love you." They got to show you they love you first. So they go into this whole thing. They, it's "I love you, I love you." It's over the top kind of thing too. And you like, "Oh my gosh, I love him too. He's so wonderful. He's amazing." But then what happens is it becomes like Ike and Tina, right? It's like the little signs will come in, like you don't even think you're gonna do something. Like for instance, he gave me my engagement ring. He got mad at me because I said something to him about a situation. So he says to me, "Give me the engagement ring back. You don't deserve this right now, because you're not the Proverbs 31 woman that I need." Okay. So that's another thing. He would use my spirituality against me. Okay. And then when I got pregnant with our daughter, it was the fact of God wants us to be together because you got pregnant with our daughter and you wasn't supposed to. This is what you're supposed to do. So you're supposed to stay. So it was always like, okay, I'm going to give you love over the top. And then when you do something, I'm going to take it back. Then I'm gonna give you some more love, and then I'm gonna tell you you're unworthy. So it's a thing where they get into the head where they like, so if you gain weight, if you do anything different, they're gonna be like, "Who's gonna put up with that? I love you so much. Nobody's not gonna put up with that. I put up with it because I love you." You got to understand what love is. So those are the little signs. Is they always playing footsie. They giving you something, then they taking it away. They giving you something, taking it away. And when you think about it as a kid, because you stuck in that pattern, because they done been abused some way, some shape or form too, right? So they have tantrums. So wherever they were abused at, whether it was 5 or 15, if you think about it, that's how they act. They act like a teenager, whatever. They throw things, they have tantrums. And then what happens is, like I said, you still in a kid state too. So you end up taking what they give you. Whatever they dish out, you take it. And you like, okay, because you want them to love you, just like I said, being molested, being younger, the crazy part about that is I already knew something was wrong with him. I just couldn't figure it out. And even though I knew something was wrong with him, that was okay, because I was going to love him through his pain. So that meant too, for me to have sexual relationships with this man, right? Because I already had a negative connotation from being molested, that sex creates this love dynamic, right? So now I'm going to have sex with him because he going to love me. He going to love me now, because even if you didn't want it, even if you didn't like it, even if you didn't care, it was the best thing ever, because you already knew he was going to love you because you did something, right? That's not it, and like I said, it's just the signs of giving you something and taking it away. So every time he gave you something and then he took it away, I had sex with him to get it back. I felt like that was getting it back, which is crazy. That's not how love feels.
That's definitely a cycle that I do feel like many men and women are trapped in. And what I keep saying, calling it by its name, that manipulation cycle, that you deserve love as an award instead of you deserve love because of who you are, is something that I see more commonly when I see domestic violence, that we don't like to call domestic violence, that mental abuse, that Taylor talked about a little bit. Just from your perspective, for young girls or young boys in teen relationships, seeing how social media is and seeing how your own experiences are, what do you think are some warning signs? Because a lot of it goes back to self-worth and how strong you are in your own belief.
Yeah, and before you answer that, I want to, share also, like with social media, I mean, clearly for us, we didn't have, the Instagram and everything that, kids today have access to. So what do you think the warning signs would be in terms of like text messages, social media? I think when we think of like when people post things about other people, when they're in a relationship that's personal, those are just things that I think of. So that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
You want to take it first, Casey?
Sure. And for me, right, I experienced this, excuse me, the culmination of at 26, right? So a lot of what I'm saying for a teenager is theory, based on what I experienced. But one big warning sign to me would be kind of distancing themselves from the people that love them a lot, right? Like their family, the people who would absolutely step in if crisis mode happened. Because a lot of what an abuser does is convince you that your people don't really love you, like not like them, and convince you that they don't want to see you happy, right? So they like isolate you and they chip away a little bit of time, like Shar was kind of saying, right? Like they're predators, right? Like they know how this goes, they know what works. So yeah, if teens are starting to distance themselves and drawing back, especially with family members they were close to, or even friends, quite honestly, right? When I heard about a victim that my ex kind of preyed on before me, this person would have had to be in their teens and early adulthood, right? Because I was young when we started dating. Her friends noticed that she would sometimes just be away for a long time and not respond to them, not answer their calls, and she would check into a hotel to hide from him, right? Like that's a sign. Like if somebody is hiding like that, I would say that's a pure telltale sign. And then obviously bruises and things like that. Like when I was initially abused, I think there's some misconceptions that there's just this gold road that, victims can walk down to get to safety, but that's not the case. Like y'all, I went to work the next day, literally thinking I would be a burden to my team if I needed to tap out. It wasn't the next day. I took the Monday, I called out sick and I went on Tuesday, but I still had bruises and aches, right? So even like these little things of like everything being sensitive to the touch and it being painful to get through meetings because I'm that sore, and some people did see me squint. They didn't say, hey, are you okay? Because Black women have a high threshold for pain. So like they just unbothered, right? But yeah, I don't know if Shy probably has more context because I was a woman, when I experienced it myself. But those are a few things.
Well, when it comes to that, I always go back to my childhood being abused little, because being abused little makes a difference when you go through teenage stage, right? And and on top of that, like I said, I almost was date raped at 16. So that's why all these things was like triggered in my mind, and that's why I tried to commit suicide, because when you're a kid, a lot of things get pushed back to the mind. That's why you're still so happy, and people don't understand like these things come up later. They're like, well, why did it come up later? Because you didn't realize till later that you actually have what they call the PTSD. You didn't know, oh, I have post-traumatic stress disorder, because nobody even talks about that. So you don't know why you would have it, because they just relate it to the military. But no, when you've been damaged good, yeah, you're going to have PTSD. But one of the situations I go back and look is when I look at one of my daughters, when she was first starting to date, because nobody can't date in my house until they 16. And she had this one guy and he was texting, but something in my spirit seriously said, let me see your phone. And I seen her phone. And when I seen her phone, the little boy said something like, why are you so happy? Like, why do you always smile? Right. And I was like, call him. I was like, okay, no, you're not going to break her down, because he already knew this cycle very early. So I was like, no, I said, you know what? Don't ever let nobody break you down. because that's what they want to do. It's always about breaking you, just like you got to break in a horse, the dog, or whatever. It's always the same kind of concept. They use that same kind of concept with domestic animals as they do with human beings, and they try to break you down and brand you. And this was the same concept. What people don't understand is this is the same concept that they used in slavery to break us. And it's a continuation of the slave mentality that these people have, because at the end of the day, we were, the black man was separated from the home. The women were made to do whatever. We were made to be servant slave. We was raped in his house. We was abused. And the crazy part about this is the men picked up this same condescending behavior, and they still continue to do some of these things. And when you go back and you look at social media, the thing about social media is everybody like, oh, hashtag relationship goals. No, forget that. Because we don't know what you're going through. It looks good. Yeah, you look good. You look happy. Your family, the aesthetic looks good. But at the end of the day, he could be punching you in your face, or stalking you or whatever. So I think the signs, besides what Casey said, was, yes, it's like taking you away from your family. It's like trying to break you and take away your happiness and joy. It's telling you negative things. And another thing is, for me, is he was using my childhood traumas against me. So anything that happened to me, it was like, it should have happened to you. Yeah, that should have happened to you. You deserved it. So whatever you didn't deserve or you feel like you don't deserve, they will try to use that and make it seem like that's what you deserve when it wasn't. And when you're younger, you don't know no better. You just like, okay, yeah, you're right, because the church said that too. And other people say that. So you know what? You might be right. So I think I'm gonna stick with you on that. Yeah. So that's how they break you down. It's the small things they start to break you down with. And I think that's what we have to watch with teens. Oh, and especially constant phone calls to see where you are. Like, where are you at? What you doing? Why are you doing it? And then, like you just told them, hey, hang up that phone. We having family dinner. Tell them you'll talk to them later. But then they call right back. And they're like, well, get away from your family because I need to talk to you. Or like when I had showed up at the door, okay, I'm at home. You just show up at the door. Excuse me. No, you don't do you don't do that. But they do that too. They'll show up at your house unannounced, or call unannounced. I mean, it's just a constant cycle. So I think some of those are the things that we have to watch out for.
That last portion you just touched on, I think that's something I really want everyone to take with them. It's one of those things that can be romanticized,
yes,
until it's not.
Right.
He's crazy about me. I can't play with him. He don't play about me.
Right.
Does he not play about you, or is he controlling?
Right.
He wants me around him all the time. Did you have a life before him? So it's one of those things that can be very, very romanticized.
And I think you see that, like, if you have like a close knit of girlfriends and they start dating one person, and it's like a person you would, see regularly, and then as soon as they're with the person, you don't see them at all, because the same thing Gayat said, like, oh no, we have to be together. He wants to do this. It definitely is romanticized.
And I think those are the signs that they're not directly domestic violence, but it's tap dancing on that line if it continues. It's very much tap dancing on that line, because y'all could just be that in love in the beginning. But I definitely feel like those are things that your friends and family need to keep an eye on. Does it continue? Do both parties get to breathe? Because that's something that happens to men also. So I do want to touch on that. Men experience obsessive love from women that could lead to domestic violence. And we want to make sure that we, the misconception that abuse only happens to women.
Right.
It's not true. And just, I know, Shai, you work with women and children, but can you touch on a little bit, just, from your experience or, the research that you've been on, what kind of abuse men experience and usually don't talk about?
Oh, men experience, it's crazy, but it's 1 out of 10 of men experience a form of domestic violence, stalking, or some form of abuse or sexual assault. But of course, they're not going to come forward because a man's supposed to be strong, right? He's supposed to be the person that's going to heal you, help you, and he should be your protector. But at the end of the day, we have a lot of men that need protecting. But not only, I don't want them to think that they're weak too, because that's what society makes them believe. If a man reports that, he's being abused, they laugh at him. Like, really, you being abused by this little woman, or really, or whatever? That makes no sense. You're a man, but the problem is, if he hits her, or if he does something to her, he's going to be arrested for assault. Okay, now we're gonna have this on his record, and then on top of that, they get scared because you think about it, a man saying that he being raped or sexually assaulted by somebody else, they're gonna be like, okay, yeah, right. And you know what? And if she's abusing him, what she can do is she can turn that around and say that he is doing that to her. So why does he need to talk about, oh yeah, that she's doing this to him? Because he can't. He has no outlet. She can do anything to him, and he's trying to be a gentleman. And not to mention, even if you're looking at homosexuality and the men that deal with that, they're gonna be like, well, you know what, you deserve that, you gay, you know what I'm saying, you deserve, what are you complaining about? That's what you want, right? So those are the things. And when you think about it too, through research or whatever, it's 33 million children that experience domestic violent abuse through their family. They see it every day. These are things, and it's a constant continuation, especially in the Black community, that it affects us really bad, and people don't really see it. And now you can see that we have men, and I love this. I love the men now coming forward and trying to heal themselves mentally, because that's what we should have been talking about, because then that would kind of detour some of the domestic violence and abuse that we have going on in the Black homes.
And I just want to add to what Shai is saying, like echo everything she's saying. And that's a deep part of healing too for the survivor. Like, when they get into the point where they can look back at the oppressor and say, you sick too, like you were abused too, right? Like, these ideas weren't conjured up out of thin air. Like, he had survived a history of abuse and then became that aggressor to feel powerful again. Like, that's what he resorted to when his back was against the wall, because it was the only way he knew how to make somebody else feel small the same way they did to him, right? And me, I know these things because we were close enough in that 10 years where eventually, I'm talking about like 9.5 years in, like I finally learned some things that he never expressed before. And those things haunted him, man, and made him sick mentally, right? But I agree with Sean. Like, if we're going to start healing these things for real, right? Like, we have to give more space for men to be honest about the abuse that keeps happening to them, and transgender Black people to be honest about the abuse that keeps happening to them, and us open up our bowels of compassion, like not just encouragement, like, oh, go get help, oh, leave that man, but like be compassionate, like hold space to listen, man, hold space to learn, right? Like, hold space to act, to put your hands to the plow and be an advocate for real, because like we just need real tools and resources. Like, we need jobs to give us resources if we want to leave, so that they buy the plane ticket, you know what I'm saying? Or they pay for the lawyer, they pay for the restraining order. Like, we need places in our communities where we can hide for a night, so that the other people, the other 100 people in the family he calling, he still can't get to you,
Right.
But yeah.
So you touched on healing. That was actually what I was going to ask you guys. So we've been talking a lot about a lot of things that you both have unlearned. And by unlearning, you've learned a new set of things as you've gone through this journey of healing. So I want to know from both of you, what does healing look like for you today? Of course, it's a day-by-day thing. It's not like it's a continuum. So yeah.
Well, when it comes for me, when it comes to healing, it's a whole continuation. Because, for instance, I'm never going to say, okay, I'm perfect. But that's why, for me, I'm not in a relationship now. That's why it's important, though, that when I do choose a mate, that he understands where I've been and where I am now, because he has to be compassionate to understand I still have PTSD. Okay. So I still have triggers. And a matter of fact, it was, this past week I had a trigger because, when you're dating or whatever, or trying to date, it's funny because people will say things to you and you like, whoa, wait a minute, and you like, did he just say that? You know what I mean? Like, I like kind of get confused for a second. And then I'm gonna tell you what it does. The trigger will put you back into this space of, well, maybe I don't deserve that. He might be right, right? And then you have to pull yourself back and say, oh, hell no. We're not finna play this game. This is a warning sign. We're moving on. Trigger alert, okay? So I'm like, I'm not doing this with you today, okay? And this is what I say. I literally say, God bless you, because it's not about being hard. Because I find it, some of the young kids, when I talk to my kids or something, they say, Mom, you're being mean. No. You don't understand. You have to ask questions, but you have to ask the right questions. So don't never stop asking questions. So you always have to understand what you deserve. You have to understand what self-love looks like to you, right? You have to define what love really is. And in order to do that, I had to go through a healing process. I had to go through counseling. I had to actually face my fears. I had to be willing to go back and tap into the things that was holding me stuck and be okay with trying to deal with those and dismantle them and move along. And I think a lot of times when we're going through things in the healing process, we don't want to deal with the past. Because if you have to deal with the past, you have to look at things that you even did as a person that was bad. You know what I'm saying? You have to really look at that. And people don't want to look, you don't want to completely look at yourself. And no, I made mistakes too. And matter of fact, I was literally willing to make other people hurt just like I was hurting. So, it was, the thing was, okay, what kind of person are you? Then I'm sitting here making this person hurt because I hurt. Because one of my poems I wrote was Sorry, Not Sorry. Because I used to always say, why the hell should I say sorry to you when nobody said sorry to me? I don't care about your feelings, really. And I felt like that was the thing I lived by. And I kept saying, that is not right. Something is wrong. So I always tell people, just like one of my poetry books, From Dark to Light, it's about, just because you in the light doesn't mean that you're not hurting, but you know how to handle things differently in the light than you did in the dark. You're not stuck on the island by yourself. Because it was times that I would just be walking around smiling and laughing and telling jokes because that's what I do. But at the end of the day, I was in my head contemplating, well, what can I do today to not be here? Okay. So I always say, don't think you're alone, but also don't think that in your healing process, you should never have problems. You're going to have problems. You're going to have triggers, and that's okay. It's about how you deal with those, how you understand those, and how you make those work in your favor, I think.
Thank you.
Super dope. I'm just so full listening to you, Shy. I love it. For me, 5 years into healing, so I left that relationship, that situation in 2016, right? So healing today looks like seasonal depression, right? It's been 5 years, and every year, right before the holiday, September, October, my body mourns what was for a long time more than a third of my life, right? I was 26 when I left, and that was a 10 years, right? So I would get into this really, really chronic depression right before Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, because there were so many traditions, right? So many dreams deferred, so many babies that were not going to be crying. I don't have any kids, for those who don't know. And I would just mourn that. And I didn't put a vocabulary to it until last September when it happened. And I call a psychiatrist because over time, over reps, you understand who to have on speed dial. Like now I have my therapist on speed dial. I do to call a psychiatrist for that because this one's chronic, right? And then he said, oh, like from everything you're telling me, you have seasonal depression. I'm like, let me add that to my list of stuff, right? But it is understanding that more and having radical self-love. Like, I'm no longer trying to fix these things. I'm giving myself space and grace to be, just protecting myself until I get through those things, right? I'm learning to put life rafts under me instead of trying to suffocate and hide the things that are imperfect, right? Life rafts being friends that I can be transparent about, be transparent with, and my therapist, who I've had since the beginning of my therapy relationship, psychiatrist, etc. It has looked like, for 5 years, refusing to date, not to have a relationship. Now, I was dating, and half of it was kind of vengeance, y'all, because I was the good girl, okay? Like, let me tell you something. After I looked at marriage, shoot,
You live.
Savage. And it was funny because a lot of the dudes, they were like, because I would tell them, like, listen, do not catch feelings with me, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want anything from you, and I will walk away. And they saw that as this, conquest, but it was always in the same way. Like, Shawty would bounce if they got and it was like that for 5 years because I couldn't stomach intimacy. I couldn't stomach trusting anybody because I didn't trust myself. I blamed myself for putting myself in that situation, right? And not being a better judge of character and all of these things. But for the first time, last December in Zanzibar, on a trip to Zanzibar, Tanzania, I fell in love, and I've been in love for the last year, and it's beautiful to learn to trust again and be like shower with compassion and understanding and all of the things, right? But then in that, healing has looked like learning to not punish him, my lover now, with mistakes of my ex, right? I would feel weird that he wasn't doing these other things, so I would brace myself for it. And if he still didn't do it, I would try to spark it or provoke these bad things and still lash out, right? Because I was punishing. I finally had somebody to punish for all these things that happened to me before. Thank God he's patient, y'all. But being able to see myself and talk out in therapy is helping me to not do that and to just trust radically, right? And there is no guarantee, but enjoy the ride for as long as it lasts. So that's what healing looks like for me 5, almost 6 years later. And like Sha said, it's not perfect. It is so imperfect. But healing is beautiful nonetheless.
Thank you. That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. Both of you. And one thing both of you touched on, and I definitely want, for us to wrap up with, is there's power in naming it. Not solving it, not just, there is so much power in naming what things are, because it takes away from you feeling crazy. It takes away from you feeling like it's all in my head. Like Casey said, it's seasonal depression. Okay, so it's not too panicky. It's something it's something Googleable. I could Google it. I could learn a little bit more about it. Triggers, PTSD. There is so much power in putting a name to it. And that allows you to liberate and start the journey to healing. Mm-hmm. So I want to make sure everyone is encouraged to those things that you just can't shake. We love to say things in our community. What do we say? Like, I don't know, it just don't sit right with me.
Something's off.
Something's off. Girl, is it anxiety? Like, there's different things for it. It just don't sit right with me. Like, finding a name, there is so much power in it. And I want to encourage people to not self-medicate, but like reach out to therapists and give them the symptoms that you're experiencing, the thoughts, because sometimes you feel like you're the only one going through it. Mm-hmm. Come to find out, they got publications and books on. Like, you're not the only one. So there's so much power in putting a name to it, then starting the healing process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I think it's very important that we put names to stuff, because a lot of times we don't know. And you know what? Another thing Black community says is, especially people who don't know no better, they always say, well, just get over it. Mm-hmm. And he was like, just get over it. No, I can't get over it. And I think that's like the old mentality from parents and grandparents to be like, well, that's what we did. Yeah, that's what you all did, but I'm not gonna do that. So no, I'm like, Casey, I got a therapist and I'm happy to go to a therapist, honey. You know what? I think one of the best things you can do to yourself, and if you have kids or whatever, is be able to invest in them with therapy. It's very important because you go through so many seasons and changes. I mean, you think about going from elementary to middle school. How many of us had horrible middle school when you first start? You know, these people, you're trying to figure out what group I supposed to fit in. Do I supposed to go over here? Do I supposed to go over there? I don't know what I supposed to do. And then, you know, what makes it very even more difficult is the fact that you already done been abused before you got there. You done been abused. You already done been misinformed. Now you're going into middle school. Some dummy finna tell you something, and you're gonna be like, "Okay, yeah, that's right." And you didn't you didn't research it. You don't even know who you are. They causing more confusion in your life because you like, okay. Then here you go from there to high school. And high school, oh my God, you know, you got friends who having sex. You got friends who doing drugs. You got friends who drinking, and you trying to figure out, well, what group should I fit in now? Like, should I do all these things too?
That is so true.
So I think it's important to have a therapist, and like I said, on speed dial if possible, and put a name to it. If you have anxiety, say you have anxiety, because just like with my kids, I don't tell you to get over it. I mean, even with my 7-year-old, I'm like, what's your problem? Like, what's going on with you today? Why do you feel that emotion? Because it is reasons why people feel emotions. And we might not know the answer for everything, but I want you to tell me what you're feeling.
Right.
I think that's powerful too. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. That's powerful too, like emphasizing the importance of exposing children to therapy, and not just exposing, but allowing it to be a part of the lifestyle, right? Because it can save, I think, our lineage, right? When we talk about legacy and generational wealth, like this is a part of generational wealth, like mental health, right? Because we pass down so many, I think, mental illnesses and trauma and all these things that run through our veins. But if children have the tools to cope earlier, articulate earlier, right? Because to AI's point about naming it, right? I didn't know I had PTSD until my therapist told me, right, in 2017, after I completely broke. I thought I broke that first time, but the 12 days I'm on a plane, I started a new job, got promotion, all these crazy things I did to work myself out of it, like Solange said. That's my cranes in the sky. That was me. Okay. And then I broke, like vegetable broke. And I went on this 4-month disability leave. Use those resources, y'all. It's yours. You pay for it anyway. They take it out of your check. But I was on paid short-term disability leave, and that's when I started therapy in 2017. But her telling me that, and her telling me you get nauseous and queasy and nervous when you're around groups right now because you have social anxiety. I didn't know that, you know, but like her telling me that better equip me. Like I'll say, the Black community has progressed, because what we've been calling this stuff is generational curses, and we lump everything in generational curses. Right. And I'm gonna break the generational curse, right? But we are advancing now, you know, to having other compartments to bucket these things in. And I think it's a beautiful thing. And as time goes on, will be even better, right? Especially because people are gonna do like Shar is saying and doing, and exposing their children to therapy. But I think that's the power in naming it, really expressing what you feel, because it's not by chance that people don't understand what survivors go through, right? Like there isn't enough vocabulary circulated yet to help them understand, right? And so it's hard for them to empathize with these experiences when they can't grasp, you know, what they're hearing or not hearing, right? And then I think too, like AI, you alluded to as well, when you know the name of it, then you can find literature and resources and articles and focus groups and all these things to connect with other people who are going through what you're going through. Because while your family may love you, they can't understand what you've been through and what you're going through if they haven't experienced it, right? And so it's just different power when you can connect with people who understand where you're going, and understand how hard that road is going to be. They'll help get you there safely. Because sometimes your family might not know that they're triggering you, and different things trigger different people. FYI, I saw a quote today that said people are triggered based on the depth of pain they have associated with certain things, right? Like it's based on and that's so real, right? Because certain things that trigger me doesn't necessarily bother anybody else, but because of my lived experiences and how deep it goes in certain veins, like I am more shook by those things. So your family and people who don't understand, they can definitely expose you, when you're very sensitive, and you will be at different parts in the journey. They can expose you to some things that might harm you. So again, having vocabulary and knowing what groups to go to can help life raft you, buoy you to the other side safely.
Thank you, guys. Go ahead, Taylor.
I was just going to say, just to kind of piggyback off the conversation, I think we do have to think about generational blessings. Like even, the both of you using your platform to tell people about your story. That's how we can, encourage other people. And once you're able to name it and you're able to look up things about it, then you see the signs. Then, when we think about going to therapy, which I think everyone should go to therapy, that you are able to change the behaviors that were unhealthy, that you experienced in your childhood. Because I think that, everyone has these things that we're like, I don't know, that was a little strange. And once you're able to name it, then when you have children, you're able to give them generational blessings. And like, this is how we're going to do things. This is how I went through it, but we're going to change the mark right here. So thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you both so much. This has been wonderful to just hear your story. And I know the transparency goes a long way, because that's something we lack in our community, that transparency of, we know we've been through it, but no one usually knows the feelings that are involved. To just leave our audience, I want both of you to just think for a moment and share what's one misconception of domestic violence that you want the audience to leave with today, that, dismantling it. What's one thing that they just need to know is not?
Yeah.
That's not it.
I'll let you go first.
Come on, Shy.
I think one misconception is, and I think we done actually touched on it though. I think one of the biggest things, especially in the minority community, is we need to understand what self-love is and understand love, period. Because we don't want to be like grandma and grandpa. We need to stop saying, let's be like grandma and grandpa, because they don't tell you the whole story. Yeah, it looked great. Yeah, they kept the family together. Grandpa worked really hard. But people don't understand the economic hardships, and not being able to get access to healthcare and education causes an extra strain in the Black communities. And because of that strain, you're going to have to come home and you're going to have to blame it on somebody. So grandma was getting knocked over her head, okay? Because grandpa couldn't get ahead like he wanted to get ahead. So she had to take the grunt of it. And, and everybody always feel like, oh, that was love because he was taking care of us. And I want the misconception to be not for people to understand and download that love is keeping the family together no matter what. I don't want people to think like that. I want us to get past that concept, and we need to understand what true love is. And I think with true love, we have to work on self.
Yes.
Wow, thank you so much for
I
sharing.
would throw my shoe. I don't have shoes on right now, but I would throw my shoe if I had one on. I to all of that. Love it. If I could add to what she said, because I agree, I echo all of it, it would be that the question, there's a misconception that the question we need to be asking those who are abused is, why aren't you leaving? Mm-hmm. The real question needs to be, what makes you stay, right? So that we can be part of the solution. What is she getting from that source on that side that she's afraid she won't have out here, so that you can supplement that with something else, right? Give it to her. Mm-hmm. Right? Is it childcare? Is it I don't have nowhere to keep my babies? Right? Is it I don't have the plane ticket I need to get out fast, and he gonna find me if I can't run fast enough, right? Mm-hmm. It could be so many things, right? Some people have kids, some people don't. Some people have chronic illnesses, others don't, right? The question is, The question should not be why haven't you left? It's why are you staying? And again, have compassion, hold space for that. I don't care if it takes 5 hours for the person, male or female, to get it out. You listen, you internalize that thing, and you come up with a plan to supplement those things that she needs, even if it's love, right? Like understand it. Like, see this person, as a human, right? With feelings and traumas and needs and frailties and all of these things, so that we really be a part of the solution instead of sitting on our high horse pointing our finger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Expecting these people to be super women and supermen. Like, that's crazy. So yeah, that's the biggest one. But just to add on what Sha said, I gotta say, a lot of big mamas should have left. I'm gonna just put that there. Like, a lot of them should have left. We keep romanticizing these stories, but Big Daddy should have been by himself. And I'm including. If my family's watching, listen, love y'all, mean it. But yeah, Big Daddy needed to be by himself, okay, with whoever he was running around with, because. Yeah, like, it just put unnecessary burdens on us. So, but I think we are chipping away at a lot of these toxic behaviors, right, and bridging ourselves to freedom. So, thank y'all for holding space. This was dope. So nice to meet you too, Sha.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
Yes, we are as a community. We're working on it. Platforms like this, conversations like this are, we're equipping the future, the next generation. We're equipping women now, men now, with normalizing it on one end and stop romanticizing it on the other end. So we definitely thank both of you for contributing and continuing to advocate and work towards, dismantling this.
Yes.
Thank you
for being a light and just, again, being vulnerable. I think we all learned something from y'all today. So thank you so much.
Yes. So
thank you.
We'll definitely be in touch. Thank you guys so much for sharing everything with us.
Yeah. Till next time.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
So much.
Bye.